Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I thought it would be really interesting during this election time period to check in with one of the existing councillors who's not running for mayor. Four of the 11 of them are running for mayor, but obviously there's several that are not. Brad Butt is the councillor for Ward 11. That's the Streetsville and surrounding area of Mississauga. He's a former member of parliament. He's a gentleman that's been involved in the community for a long period of time. I remember back in the 2000s, we got to know each other because I was chair of the Mississauga City Summit and you were from Rogers coming in, and you did all the announcing about it. And it was really a great job that you did covering that summit. And so I thank you for that. Brad, you're councillor for Ward 11. You've been on council for a while. What do you think the big issues are that are facing Mississauga today?
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me to be with you today and to talk about things that are obviously going on in Mississauga and the challenges that we're facing and where we need to move ahead as a city. Clearly, right now, I think everybody would say that affordability and housing and with housing infrastructure is included in that are the most important and challenging issues that we are dealing with as a municipality. I mean, housing is a big issue for all cities across the country, not just Mississauga, but it is a particular challenge here, and we desperately need new, attainable, and affordable housing for folks of all ages and all backgrounds, and we need to do a much better job getting housing built.
We're only getting, I think it's between 15 and 20% of the provincial allotment of housing starts actually started. Why are we so poor in accomplishing the objectives that the provincial government has set out for us?
One of the biggest challenges that we have in Mississauga now is that essentially we've run out of what so-called greenfield space. So space that's completely open, simply needs to be serviced, and then you can go ahead and build. Our challenge now is that the vast majority of developments in Mississauga are all infill developments. So they're more complicated. They take longer to do. Heights and densities that were never envisioned for these communities are now very much being proposed throughout. I mean, look at what's going on in Port Credit right now as an example. And I mean, obviously in our city center, we always had proposed that there would be unlimited heights and very, very tall buildings there. But other areas, including, you know, my own community of Streetsville, where we're getting many development applications coming in. And of course, the heights and densities being asked for are much higher. But the challenge is that these are so-called infill developments, and it just is more difficult to get done, regardless of what the province is asking us or mandating us, some would argue, to do in the way of the types of housing and the amount of housing that we need to accept in our communities. These are just very, very complicated developments to get approved.
You say, you know, asking or mandating. Do you think the provincial government is wrong in their desire for Mississauga to expand its housing?
No, I don't think so, but I do think we have to respect the character of neighborhoods. As they say, downtown Mississauga is not Streetsville, and Streetsville is not Port Credit. I mean, we've got to look at areas. I mean, one of the areas where the provincial government is asking municipalities to do a lot more in the way of height and density and development is along what are known as major transit station areas, MTSAs we call them. So that's going to be along GO train lines and where we have our new Hazel McCallion Hurontario LRT, which will eventually be up and running. Those are areas that are absolutely appropriate for significantly increased height and density. It's when you're getting into well-established neighborhoods and communities where we have to have the right balance of the way in which we build and develop in those communities. So we respect the history and in my case of Streetsville, the heritage of a community at the same time that we do bring in some new housing.
So, you know, the Lakeshore line is all day, two-way frequent GO train service. It's not on the Milton Mississauga line. So Streetsville doesn't have sort of the same, you know, justification that Port Credit or Clarkson would have. So what are you saying? Is you saying that, the density should be down in Port Credit and Clarkson, but not at Streetsville?
We're going to get some density in Streetsville, but not at the level that we are seeing in other parts of the city where they are on MTSA routes. I know the provincial and to some degree the federal governments have kind of promised that two-way all-day GO train service on the Milton line is coming, but there's no definitive date. There's no money on the table. It's a significant major reinvestment, mainly because you've got to put a third rail line along that corridor, and that's going to involve some very significant infrastructure changes, including likely some grade separation, so underpasses to allow the trains to move freely and not be interrupted with vehicle traffic, and safety reasons as well for that. But having said that, it's going to be a long time before we're going to see two-way all-day service, in my opinion, on the Milton line. So to suggest that developments that people want to build today should be treated the same as those on MTSA lines, because it might be an MTSA 25 years from now, I'm not sure is the appropriate way in which we do our planning.
I want to come back to the all-day two-way GO maybe later on in the show, but let's stay on housing for a second. I'm told that the planning approval process is broken, that it takes way too long, that it's something like 5 to 7 years to get approvals, and it takes only 2 to 3 years to actually build. So it takes twice or maybe even longer than twice as long to get the approvals as it does to actually build something. Is that right? Is that appropriate? Can we change it?
I would like to see it improved and changed. The provincial government brought in a couple of pieces of legislation in the last year that were supposed to help speed up the process. It actually did the opposite. It actually made it more difficult, more complicated, and more time-consuming than what we had previously. And that's just because of the way they made the changes to the Planning Act and how these developments get approved. At the same time, we as a municipality have to do better. I think Mississauga is pretty good, but I think we could do a better job. I think we could be processing applications quicker. I think we could be streamlining the process. One of the things that is going to happen is, as your viewers and listeners may know, we have a two-tier municipal government here in Mississauga. So we have the City of Mississauga and the Region of Peel. Both have planning departments until July 1st of this year, where the region's planning function will cease. That's going to help eliminate duplication and hopefully speed up the planning process, so that planning approvals will solely be at the City of Mississauga level and not at the Region of Peel level. As well as the government's brought forward another piece of legislation to undo some of the stuff that they did previously, to get us back on track to where we can be moving these development applications along quicker. So better days ahead, I'm hoping, but we have a job to do in Mississauga. The developers have a job to do too. They've got to submit complete applications, do all the studies, the homework, the background, and submit them properly. And then we should be expediting these development applications as quickly as we can.
I think that if we could start expediting applications, that would be spectacular, because I do think that when you think about all the work that goes into actually building a apartment building or a condominium building, and that it takes 2 or 3 times longer to just get the review done, the approval done, it's atrocious. It's unbelievable bureaucracy and red tape. And I think it's a huge mistake. And, we've heard criticisms about how it's impossible to get a mine approved or a pipeline approved or any kind of exploitation of our natural resources approved. It takes as long to get a house or a building approved. It's mind-boggling. Anyway, we got to take a break for some messages, and we're going to come back in 2 minutes with Councillor Brad Butt, Councillor for Ward 11, one of the people that is not running for mayor, and chat with him about what some of the big issues are. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. It's a real pleasure tonight to chat with Councillor Brad Butt. He is the councillor for Ward 11 in the city of Mississauga. And I thought, you know what, it'd be really good to hear from a councillor that's not running for mayor what some of the issues are, because clearly, some of these councillors think that they can do better, change things. And so that's why they want to become the new mayor and the new leadership. But Brad's been on, Councillor Butt's been on council for a while. He's been a member of parliament previously. He's been very involved in the community prior to that. And I thought it would be helpful to chat with him. Councillor Butt, let's talk about, this issue of all day two-way go on the Milton Mississauga line that you talked about. I had as you may know, I'm chairman of an organization called Transit Alliance, which is a GTA-wide transit organization. I had a transportation engineer come up to me and show me plans that were submitted in the 1960s to solve the problem. And it was, then an issue because they wanted to take dangerous freight out of going through not only Mississauga, but out, right through Toronto, because that CP line that goes through Mississauga actually goes right through the center of Toronto, through Casa Loma, the Annex, Forest Hill, out to by Leaside, etc. And then after the train derailment, and I think it was 1978, which was the largest peacetime evacuation in Canadian history. There was a new group of people that thought that we should do that, but it never happened. And then, about 10 years ago, the big move, the Places to Grow legislation, the Neptus Foundation, all those other groups did studies that said that the Milton Mississauga line had an 8-to-1 benefit to cost ratio. It was the most valuable transit expansion of any transit expansion, they said, in North America. Most transit plans are like 2 to 3 times. And the Scarborough extension and the Shepherd subway actually had a benefit that was less than the cost, and so therefore should never have been built, but they were built. And yet the Milton Mississauga one was an 8-to-1 benefit to cost ratio and was never built and has never been built. We've talked about it for 20 years. A political campaign that I'm reasonably familiar with talked about it about 12 years ago. Why? What's gone wrong? Why something so important, so powerful, with such an incredible benefit to the people hasn't been built?
Well, I think there's several reasons. Obviously, the most, the main one that always seems to be the problem is money, right? I mean, who's funding this? Who's going to get the work done? Is the federal government coming to the table, as well as the provincial government through its agency Metrolinx, which of course operates the GO Transit system? So money. Number two is it belongs to CP Rail. I mean, it is not our line. It doesn't belong to the public or the government or the taxpayers. It is a private rail line, and therefore you have to make accommodation with the owners and operators of the rail line to provide the capacity that's necessary for passenger commuter traffic to be able to use that line more than is obviously being used right now. I think the other problem in the past has been that the argument was that people only went one way. People left Mississauga to go to Toronto in the morning, and they left Toronto in the afternoon to come back to Mississauga. And that's actually completely the opposite today. Mississauga is a net importer of jobs every day. There are tons of people who live in Toronto who work in Meadowvale or work in Milton or work in Streetsville, that if that rail line was going the other way, they would be using it. I believe the usership would skyrocket if we had two-way all-day use on the line. But really, it's political will, it's money, and then it's being able to do that arrangement with CP Rail to provide the capacity for that level of service on the line. And until those three things come together, it's not going to happen.
I think there's a couple of other things, but I want to, go for a second on some of the issues you said. Political will. So, we had this derailment in Lake Megantic, and the mayor and the council went crazy. The provincial and federal government got involved, and they built a bypass around Lake Megantic so that dangerous goods would no longer go through Lake Megantic. We had a derailment in Calgary, and Mayor Nenshi went crazy, and the provincial government went crazy, and they did a bypass around Calgary, so the dangerous goods would not go through Calgary. We had the largest evacuation in history, the largest peacetime evacuation in history, right there at Mavis Road in Mississauga. So proof positive that a derailment can happen. Why haven't we got the political will to take dangerous goods out of Mississauga and Toronto?
Well, that's an excellent question. Obviously successive federal and provincial governments over decades obviously have not felt that that was a priority. There was a plan for something called the missing link, which was going to divert the CP rail freight off of the Milton line and onto a line that's actually owned by CN Rail, but working on a deal so we could divert that freight up further north through the CN Intermodal through Brampton, but allow CP Rail to use it. I don't know whatever happened to that. I know there was some quite a bit of conversation about making that happen, and it just seems to have fallen apart. I mean, where I live in Streetsville, I overlook the CP rail line. I see the freight every day going by my home, and I know, and I've always
stop on Mississauga Road to wait till it passes on Mississauga Road at the the grade pass.
Yeah, and again, if we do get two-way all-day go service, I mean, I suspect the Mississauga Road and CP Rail intersection will have to be a grade separation. I suspect that they will have to build an underpass or an overpass, as the case may be, so that the rail lines can function. But having said that, I look out the window of my home office every day and I see those freight cars going past my home, and I have often wondered in the back of my mind what would happen if there were, God forbid, a derailment, and how many residential homes are very closely impacted by that. So listen, I remember 1979 when we had the train derailment. I remember that very well. Living at home with my parents and being evacuated and etc. And it's a scary thing. We need goods movement by rail in this country. It's essential. But you're right. If we can find ways to divert it from residential areas, that should be a priority for government.
Let me give you another argument, if I could. Markham has got all-day two-way GO train service on that Markham line that goes up to Stouffville and ultimately to Uxbridge. The subway, obviously, that's been extended into Vaughan is even better than all-day two-way GO. It's subway service. But both Markham and Vaughan built a fair amount of density. Markham at that new, downtown Markham that's just by Kennedy Road, if you're familiar with it, between Kennedy and Warden at a GO train station. Vaughan in the Metro Center has obviously dramatically increased density at that Vaughan Metro Center, and it's spectacular. They got 50, 60-story towers. They're building a new Living Arts Center. Great retail, great entertainment. It's the new downtown, effectively, for Vaughan. The Yonge Street subway is going to be extended to Steeles and then ultimately to Richmond Hill. But there's 15,000 units planned for Yonge and Steeles. So one of the justifications for building more frequent, better transit is if the cities will follow through with, obviously increasing density. The density height limits at Dixie Road are 12 stories. The density height maximums at Huron, Ontario are 25 stories. If I was a provincial government, I would say to Mississauga, you want GO trains, you want subways, you want some better transit, start building what Vaughan and what Richmond Hill and what Markham are building. Otherwise, you're not justifying it. You're saying you want it, but it's going to be like the Bloor subway. And I had Jennifer Keesmaat, the former chief planner for the city of Toronto, on my show. She said, Yonge Street was brilliant because at every major intersection we built density, and people worried that it was going to impact their communities. A block or two off Yonge Street, you've still got single family homes. So there's density at the station, but it doesn't change the character of things that are, a block or two away. But in Bloor Street, Bloor subway was never economic because we never allowed that density to exist. And it's only finally coming today along that Bloor Danforth line. So what do you say? Is it justified that the province and Metrolinx should be saying, you've got to agree to build density before we agree to give you all day two-way GO?
Well, I suspect that is going to be the requirement at the end of the day, that if you don't have certain minimum densities along rail corridors, then you're not getting two-way all-day service. I mean, when you look at the work I think that Richmond Hill, or sorry, that the York region and their area municipalities have done to work with the province to strike that balance of wanting higher order transit in their cities, and at the same time agreeing to build much higher heights and densities. They've cut that deal. One of the challenges that we have in along the Milton line anyway is that, as I say, we are already for the most part built up. I mean, we have small pockets of infill development that likely will never achieve the densities that you would want to see, for a full all day two-way GO train service. I mean, you just can't put 35-story apartment buildings in Streetsville. It's just not going to happen, and that may mean that the province says that they can't justify two-way all-day GO train service. But I think they're committed to eventually getting it there anyway, and we are getting some increase in height and density in requests of new development in places like Streetsville and Meadowvale, and hopefully that's going to be at a level that has that right balance. And allows us to get better transit GO train service on that line, and have some density that is compatible with the community.
I'll give you one final point about why I think this is so ludicrous. The BC government has mandated a rule on communities in the Lower Mainland that if they're within 400 meters of not only a SkyTrain station, a train station, like subway station, but 400 meters of a bus exchange, so where two major bus routes cross. The minimum height is 12 stories. At Dixie, within 800 meters of the GO train station, the maximum height is 12 stories. BC is saying you got to build more than 12, and Mississauga is saying you got to build less than 12. It's completely, like, it's ludicrous.
Yeah. We've had a few motions come to council with respect to heights and densities and minimum or maximum heights along MTSA zones. I've actually voted against those. I don't think we should be artificially restricting height and density on MTSAs. If a builder developer can prove through their planning justification that an area along Dundas or along Dixie can support much higher heights and density because there is a GO train station there, or because eventually we will have the bus rapid transit along Dundas, then that's a justification for higher heights. Why would we cap it? Why would we say 12 is the max? It doesn't make any sense to me.
And
right?
I think that former Mayor Hazel McCallion was brilliant when she put no cap on height at Square One. And developers didn't build 80 or 100 stories. They built what they thought the market could bear. But when you gave that opportunity for people to build an extra little bit of height and make a little bit more money, what did they do? They attracted Starchitects to come in and build beautiful buildings. I was in City Hall when I actually registered for mayor, and you know what you've got on your screens is a picture of the Marilyn Monroe Towers. Mm-hmm. It's something you're proud about. Just like Toronto would brag about the CN Tower, Mississauga was bragging about the Marilyn Monroe Towers and bragging about M-City. Mm-hmm. If you give developers an opportunity to build something spectacular, they'll build something spectacular that you can be proud about. But if you limit them to short, squat buildings, you know what they're going to build? Short, squat buildings, because that's what you asked them to build.
Right. Yes, and that's why I said earlier, I think there are areas of the city that are appropriate for those heights and those densities. The city center is one. Anything on an MTSA route, obviously, I don't think we should be capping heights for any buildings. I know some of the mayoralty candidates are talking about doing mixed use now along here, Ontario, where it has in the past been designated office commercial for the most part, but maybe we need to be doing some hybrid buildings along there, where maybe there is some office commercial use, but there's also residential. A, because we need the housing, and B, because you can support those heights on what's going to be a future light rail transit line. So I think those are the kinds of things we need to be doing more of as a municipality and supporting those things rather than getting all worked up that, you know, these buildings are too high and there's too much density and all this when they're right on a major public transportation route. That's exactly where you build height and density.
So let me ask you two more questions in that regard. So I've been told that the urban design in Mississauga is outmoded, and that the two examples that I've been given, you've sort of mentioned one, is number one, that all the height had to be in Square One area downtown, and that you had to have everything else be of lower height, which was similar to what Toronto had about a decade ago. But Toronto has changed such that you no longer have to have all the height in downtown. They now allow height at 6 points, at Yonge and Eglinton, at Yonge and Shepherd, at Yonge and Steeles. Yonge and Steeles is building 50 and 60-story towers at the Golden Mile in Scarborough. And in fact, what they've said is it's far better from an infrastructure standpoint, from a network standpoint, from a efficiency of subways and transit that goes with traffic both ways, if we have several different nexuses of development and height and density, not concentrating everything downtown. And then the second thing they've said, and you know, you comment about mixed use on Huron Ontario as an example. All of that area from the 401 North on Yonge Street was designed at one point in time by Mel Lastman, when he was mayor of North York, as employment. And it had to stay just office because he was trying to build up an office district. It's now all being changed to mixed use. And it's two reasons why. Number one, it's because we need housing. And number two, because actually people today don't want to necessarily commute from where they live to where they want to work. They want to be able to walk. Mixed use developments where you live and work in the same area is actually something that people want, and it makes for a more lively, more vibrant community. So should Mississauga consider allowing height outside of downtown equal to what is in downtown? And should Mississauga consider mixed use development along here in Ontario?
The answer is yes to both of those, so long as the height and density, again, is in areas that have superior public transit options for people to use, and that they are walkable areas as well. So we encourage people to walk or bike or take public transit rather than taking a car. Those areas, absolutely, we need to be looking at higher heights and densities. And the second thing is, as they say, with mixed use, I mean, if we've got office buildings in the downtown core that are half empty because, and some of this is because of what we learned from COVID, that more and more people can work from home. They do not need to be in an office 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, you know, every day, you know, every month of the year. People are working hybrid. A lot of people just completely working from home now. You don't need as much office space. So what would be wrong with taking an office building that still needs several floors of office and then converting the rest to residential? I think that should be in our official plan. I think that should be a policy that we encourage. Not to completely wipe out the office commercial. I think we're going to have a balance, because we need those places, we need those jobs. But why not? Why not look at new developments that are being built on the ground floor, having a school? I mean, like, that would encourage people to live and walk to school and be right there. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff that we can do. We can be looking at community recreation facilities that are a partnership with the private sector, whether it be a community center or a gym or a fitness center or a pool or whatever that could be integrated in. So I think we need to think outside the box as to how some of these new developments are built, and we shouldn't be afraid to partner with the private sector, bring them in, talk to them, have these really neat conversations about things that we could be doing, and not just in the city core. I think we should be looking at that, throughout areas of the city. Our one challenge on here, Ontario Street, though, as you get further north, is unfortunately we have an airport in our city, and so heights are restricted in parts of those areas because of the fact that it is under flight paths. So we can't just build anything we want as far as some parts of the city. We are restricted because of the proximity to Pearson Airport. But having said that, we should be, again, working as best we can to maximize height and density in those corridors where we've got excellent public transit.
Councillor, I've been involved in numerous different industries. I've been in the beer industry. I've been in the entertainment industry. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry. I've been in the development industry. I am shocked at how much red tape and regulation is in the real estate development business. And people think about the real estate development business as free enterprise and capitalism. There is more government interference, interaction, red tape, regulation in that business. And Jane Jacobs back in the 1960s wrote the book The Life and Death of Great American Cities, and she said at the time that the organic development of cities is the best way to develop cities because what you get is what people want. It's the neighborhoods that end up getting developed. And I really think that too much of our zoning processes and political interference at times ends up stymieing great development. And what we've just talked about in regards to mixed use development, if that's what people want, let them build it. In Manhattan today, in Toronto today, across the world today, people are converting office space into residential uses. And why not Mississauga? Or, land that was zoned office. Why not changing it like Toronto was doing north of the 401 on Yonge Street? So I think that you need more free enterprise in real estate development. You need to get rid of the red tape and regulations. Anyway, there's another big issue I want to talk to you about that we've chatted about before, and that's crime. So we're going to take a break for some messages, and we're going to come back in 2 minutes with Councillor Brad Butt from Ward 11, and we're going to talk about what I think and what numerous people think is a unbelievable increase in crime, why it's happening, and what we can do about it. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Councillor Brad Butt. He is the councillor for Ward 11 in the city of Mississauga. He's a councillor that's not running for mayor, even though 4 of them are currently running for mayor. Councillor, lots of people are complaining about crime, and it's car theft, it's home invasions, it's burglaries. And I'm astounded. We're hearing reports of guns in Port Credit and gunfights in Port Credit. Like, whoever would have thought? Back in 1978, I think it was, Mississauga was awarded a award of the safest city in Canada. And now I'm worried that, we're not safe at all. What's going on, and what can and should be done about it? Or is this not true that we're having this crime spree?
No, I think we've got some crime and safety concerns in Mississauga. I mean, I don't think we're anything like some of the big U.S. cities where we hear about that level of very violent and serious crime. But we have our fair share. I think as our population has grown, we're a big urban municipality now. We're not a sleepy suburb. That is not what Mississauga is now. And unfortunately, there has been a significant rise, and Peel Police will tell you this, in the type and scope of organized crime. In the past, it used to just be drugs. Like, it was basically organized crime was all driven by the drug trade. Well, they've realized that there's other areas that are more lucrative or easier to get involved in, and that's where we've seen this massive spike in auto theft. This is an extremely lucrative business for them, and easy money. And unfortunately, a situation where we just don't have enough resources on the ground to prevent this kind of thing from happening. Now, we're starting to see some turnaround in that. Peel Police is reporting that auto theft is actually on the decline in the region of Peel, particularly in Mississauga, and that is a good thing. I think there was quite a spike. And now we've seen it come back down a little bit. But if I don't get 3 or 4 calls a week into my office of a resident who had a car stolen or has had someone break into their home or break into their garage or something, where they're obviously looking to find something valuable that they can use, it's been an unusual week. I just get those calls and emails quite a bit, where I didn't necessarily get those when I first started as a member of council. So something's going on. Something is happening.
What can we do? I understand that the Peel Police budget as a percentage of the Peel budget is something close to 50%, like 47% or something.
Yeah, 50% of the budget of the region of Peel is for Peel Police. $1.4 billion.
And it's increased like greater than 10% this past year.
They asked for a 14% operating increase in the 2024 budget, which was approved by council, and those resources are being allocated, including the plan to hire 135 new officers in 2024.
So, Councillor, if half of Peel money goes, or 47% of the Peel money goes to the police, and it's going up by 14%, and we're still having this crime spree, what's going wrong?
Well, we just can't keep up with it. Unfortunately, we just don't have enough bodies on the ground to deal with it. I mean, if we could hire thousands of more officers and afford to do it, we do it. I remember as a kid, you could always sort of see a police car driving around through the neighborhood, just looking around. We just don't have the resources for that any longer. The type of crime is different. Domestic violence calls are through the roof in Peel region. They will tell you that. The other types of serious calls police are responding to are taking them away from doing general patrols or being able to focus on certain neighborhoods that have had challenges in the past. And of course, police can't do it alone. That's why we have organizations like Safe City Mississauga that run Neighborhood Watch and Business Watch and some of these others, because we need folks getting involved to help out. But it's a resource issue. And again, it's how we all behave. Making sure that your car is secured properly. Put it in the garage if you have one. Make sure it's locked up properly. Make sure it's a more difficult vehicle to steal by whatever means that you have for security of it. I mean, these are the kind of things that we need people to be doing themselves to help us, but at the same time, we definitely do not have the resources that are adequate enough for our police.
What about our community? Do we have that, community spirit, that community trust, that social trust today that we need to have, such that people are watching out for their neighbors? I remember again, Jane Jacobs, she said, the best way to stop crime is vigilant neighbors, nosy neighbors, eyes on the street. Do we have that still today?
We've got 140 neighborhood watches in the city of Mississauga. I mean, that's pretty impressive. I don't know how active each of them are. I know the ones, in my ward, and I can tell you that the ones that I'm familiar with, those, I wouldn't call them nosy neighbors, but I would say they're active. And the other some of them have set up WhatsApp chat rooms. So they've got everybody to sign on. And when someone sees something that they think is out of line in the neighborhood, they're firing a message out to their neighbors. Did you see this blue car? It's been sitting on the road now for 6 and 7 hours, and I don't recognize the car. I don't know who it may be. Or did you see this person wandering around? Or if there is an actual incident, they can immediately fire something out to people and say, unfortunately, my car was just stolen out of my driveway, and let people know. So no, I think there's still a good civic responsibility among a lot of people in neighborhoods throughout Mississauga. That's a good thing. And but there certainly are going to be areas where people are not engaged, not knowing who their neighbors are, not participating when there's opportunities to be part of the neighborhood. We need to encourage people to do more and to be more involved.
What else do you think is a big issue in Mississauga today? We've talked about housing affordability. We've talked about crime. What are the other big issues that you're hearing about when you talk to your neighbors and your residents?
Well, I mean, the number one issue that comes into my office in all encompassing traffic. And that's right from parking, that's from speeding, that's from other types of traffic problems, gridlock in some areas. It is a constant issue in councillors' offices. I can assure you that we're getting called about people that want a parking prohibition on their street, or the other side of it, they want permission to be able to park. One of our challenges is, as more and more houses are converted into more than one dwelling unit within them, we're going to have more and more vehicles associated with those homes. And therefore, where are they going to park? How are they getting access in and out of that neighborhood? And how are we dealing with that?
I got to ask you a question about that. I apologize for interrupting, but and I know this isn't your area, but in South Mississauga, we've got Brightwater that's going to be, I think, 10 to 15,000 people. We've got Lakeview that's going to be 25 to 50,000 people, depending on whether this doubling MZO goes through. There's not one extra lane of any roadway that's being built. There's not any transit that is being built to either Brightwater or Lakeview. And frankly, South Mississauga Lakeshore Road is congested already with 65,000 extra people potentially, or maybe it's 35,000 extra people. How could that possibly have been approved? I think the developments look gorgeous, and the condominiums that they're proposing and the entertainment, and then, the boardwalks on the waterfront, they look spectacular. But to approve that with zero improvement in roadway and zero improvement in transit, South Mississauga is going to be a congestion disaster. If you're on Mississauga Road or Huron, Ontario, or Cawthra or Dixie or Lakeshore, you're not going to be able to exist. And what it's going to do is it's going to spill over into Stavebank and Ogden and other streets as people, can't get up the existing streets. How does something like that happen, sir?
Well, the Brightwater development was essentially approved by council, so those heights and densities were. The Lakeview site was actually a minister's zoning order, so the provincial minister of municipal affairs and housing issued a zoning order to permit 16,000 units to be built there. That was double what council had approved. Having said that, will both those developments have an impact on traffic and transportation? Absolutely. Anyone that would say anything different it's not correct. Of course they will. Is it going to be manageable and sustainable? I guess time will tell. We had this very unique situation as a municipality of two very large industrial uses built on our lake 200 years ago that were 150 years ago, that we all admit now you would never do that today. You would never build, massive, dirty industrial uses on your waterfront. And now that those have been turned over, and now that they've been turned into these mixed use developments, you're right. The roadway network and the other things were not built to accommodate that, and with no ability to widen. I've got the same challenge on Queen Street in Streetsville. It's only ever going to be 2 lanes, and with a turning lane perhaps in the middle, a left turn lane. But other than that, I mean, it'll never be more than it is. Lakeshore Road will never get expanded. So it is going to be a massive challenge on traffic and transportation issues along Lakeshore Road when these 2 developments are finally fully up and operating.
Brightwater is 75 acres. You probably are familiar with the Mr. Christie site at Park Lawn. It's 25 acres. So Lakeview is Brightwater is 3 times the size of the Mr. Christie site. Lakeview is 120 acres. And so therefore it is, like 5 times the size, maybe even 6 times the size of Mr. Christie. The only way that the Mr. Christie site got approved was when the provincial government said they'd put in an extra GO train station, so that they're proposing to build an extra GO train station in the middle of that 25-acre site development. But yet we're getting nothing for Brightwater and Lakeview. It makes no sense. And, you're nice because you say it's going to be challenging. I wouldn't say the word challenging. I'd say it's going to be a disaster, an unmitigated disaster. I just, the people that are on Mississauga Road, and maybe you don't have a lot of sympathy for them, but on Mississauga Road or Huron, Ontario, or Cawthra, south of the QEW, it's going to be crazy. Anyway, we're going to take a break for some messages and come back with Councillor Brad Butt in just 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Councillor Brad Butt from Ward 11, and he's one of the councillors not running. 4 of them are, but one of the councillors that's not running for mayor. And so I thought it'd be really good to check in with him. I want to finish up with a couple of questions that have come up on some of these debate stages in the last little while in the mayoralty campaign, if I could. And if you want to pass, go ahead and say pass, but I'd love to. So, some of the councillors and some of the people are saying that it's completely inappropriate for someone to run for council if they haven't resigned their council post. And the explanation they would use that in a general election, you can't run for mayor and council at the same time. You'd have to, not run for one. And that, MPs, MPPs, city employees, and anyone that's a politician in any other city would not be able to run for mayor and hold that other post. So, Charles Sousa, for an example, if he wanted to run for mayor, he'd have to resign as a member of parliament.
Yep.
But for some reason, 3 of the councillors are thinking that they can still hold their council post and run for mayor. Some people have said that's unethical, it should be illegal, it's wrong. And other people have said, oh no, it's the laws allow it, might as well go ahead and do it. What do you think?
Well, I would like to see the provincial government change the rules as it relates to being a sitting councillor and being able to run for another level of office. I think you should have to resign your seat to run. That's my personal opinion. We did have one of our councillors that did decide to do that on her own, even though she's not required to do it. I mean, you'd have to ask those other 3 why they didn't feel it was appropriate to resign their seat while running for mayor. But I would like to see the province, and I've spoken to a couple of the MPPs about this, that I think the province should change the act that would require someone to resign their council seat if they wish to run for another level of office.
It's not fair that an MPP would have to, an MP would have to, that a city worker would have to, and that for some reason, these councillors think they can get away with it. Let me give you another issue. The rule on election signs is you're not allowed to put up election signs, in quote, because it's defined term in the law, election signs, until May the 12th. One of the candidates put up digital billboard signs and says they're not election signs. So they're not covered by that rule that says election signs can't go up to May 12th. And I would have thought that, frankly, when you've got a rule that says election signs can go up only on May 12th, it's to give everyone an equal chance, an equal footing, so that, people can't take advantage of their money, their establishment, their incumbency, or whatever to get a jump. But this one councillor effectively did that and got a jump by saying, I can pay for billboards, digital billboards, and put them up before the rule, and they're not election signs, even though clearly they're all about the election. So what do you think? Is that wrong? Should it be illegal, or is it illegal? I frankly think it might be illegal.
I think it could be illegal as well. I mean, I would defer that to our clerk, who would look at the Municipal Elections Act and determine, and our own bylaws at the City of Mississauga with respect to what the definition of sign is. And whether or not those electronic billboard signs are considered to be signs, as in the sign you'd have on your front lawn for the candidate that you're supporting, or not. I was surprised that the billboard signs were up as early as they were, given the fact that election signs are not permitted, as you already said, to be placed on people's property until the 12th or 11th or 12th of May. And I would have assumed that was the rule. But obviously there were, and I think there's more than one candidate that has electronic billboard signs up already. And I would have assumed that was not permitted until all signs were permitted to be put out.
We don't have political parties supposedly in municipal politics, and one of the candidates is using the membership lists that came from the Liberal leadership campaign to send out emails. And I know that because people that are not on any other email list are receiving emails from that one candidate. And the only thing that they did is they joined up as a member in the Ontario Liberal leadership campaign. Should candidates be able to use email lists that come from one of the political parties?
I don't think you should be able to use lists that are generated from other sources, particularly if people have joined to support a particular cause or a particular political party or particular candidate, and then that list gets shopped around to other people. I was always under the impression that there were rules against that kind of thing. But obviously, probably like anything else, there's loopholes that you can drive a truck through on some of these things. I know, as far as I think most of us are getting these robocalls at home as well from mayoralty candidates. I don't know how they're getting my home phone number. I haven't given my home phone number to anybody. But I'm getting them here on my home. They're leaving voicemail messages on my home. I barely even use my home phone, and
Other than
I'm
to get
getting
robocalls.
other than get robocalls. So, I mean, I'm getting them. I don't know where they got these lists from. I haven't given my home phone number out to any one of the mayoralty candidates that is running yet. I'm getting calls. So I'm on a list somewhere, and that list is being shared with the mayoralty candidates. I just don't know where it's come from.
Last question, if I could. One of the candidates, when talking about the challenge of getting approvals through the current morass of the planning approval process, said the solution was to have a mayor's summit with qualified developers once a month, where that mayor would insert herself into the process and try to get them approved. Which was nice of her to suggest that she would get involved to do it. But the problem with that is that then, number one, it, I think, is proof positive that the system doesn't work. Because if the system's got roadblocks and problems that need the mayor to get involved in, that means that the system actually isn't working. It would be better to fix the system. And then number two, what it does is suggest there's going to be favoritism and political influence involved. So what do you think? Is it the right solution to have a mayor's summit once a month with qualified developers for that one mayor to decide what gets to go ahead or not? Or is that actually proof positive that the system needs to be changed?
Well, I think it's absolutely right for us to be listening to the development community. And I mean, when developers talk to me and they say, Brad, here's an example of something they're doing in Barrie that works really, really well. We're building in Barrie, and Mississauga could implement this. Why wouldn't we listen to that stuff? Why wouldn't we sit down with builder developers on best practices, on better ways to process stuff? Now, whether that's led and driven by the mayor alone, or whether that's some system we have that encourages builder developers in Mississauga to come to the table to give us their best ideas and best advice on how we can significantly improve the system. I mean, whether the mayor wants to have a meeting with these folks once a month or not that's up to the mayor. But I think we need to be doing a lot better job of listening to these professional builder developer companies. They're doing this stuff all the time. Right? It's not like a one-off guy that decides he's going to build a house tomorrow, has never built a house before. I mean, these are professional, long-standing companies that have been in this business for decades and decades. They know how to get stuff built. They know how to get stuff done. We need to do a better job of listening to them. And I know sometimes the view is, well, they're just doing it for their own, their own personal benefit and everything else. But at the end of the day, if they've got a better way for us to build the mousetrap, then we should be listening to them, and we should be looking for ways to implement those ideas. So if that's through the mayor or through council, or just listening to the feedback that we're getting from the development community and how we can do a better job in Mississauga, I think we should be listening.
I agree with you with listening, but I think it's wrong that not changing the system such that you've got to appeal to the political people to get things done. I think that's a proof positive the system is broken down. Anyway, Councillor Brad Butt, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure, Brian. Thanks for inviting me.
That's our show for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every night at 6 p.m. on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. My podcasts and videos are on my website, briancrombie.com, on good podcast servers, and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Good night, everybody. Thank you, Councillor Butt.